Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. This time we're going to be looking at a brand new Tier 8 Japanese premium medium tank coming in patch 9.6. This is the STA-2. If you love your Japanese medium tanks, maybe you have an STB-1 and you're looking to accelerate some crew training, or maybe you just love medium tanks with excellent gun depression but still having a little bit of turret armor to work with and you didn't really like the AMX CDC, if you like well-rounded medium tanks and you're in the market for a premium vehicle, then stick around. I'm going to let you know everything there is to know about the STA-2 with some gameplay coming right up after we discuss the differences between the STA-1 and the STA-2. So when we look at the model, the STA-2, it doesn't really resemble an STA-1. The hull is completely different, it's shortened and the tank is taller. For me, it strongly resembles a Type 61, which is the Tier 9 Japanese medium tank. The vehicle has 1,420 hit points. It weighs just shy of 34.5 tons when it's fully equipped, which is pretty much exactly the same as the STA-1. But it has 70 less horsepower. It's only got 500 horsepower on its engine. This means that while the top speed and the track traverse are exactly the same as the STA-1, because of the less powerful engine, the STA-2 gets up slopes quite a lot slower than the STA-1 does. And its track traverse suffers a little bit as well because of the engine power difference, taking it slightly longer to re-engage your enemies, which I'm going to show you more of later in the video. The hull and turret armor statistics are exactly the same as the STA-1. It should be noted, however, that the turret is much shorter and that this box at the back does not count as a hit target. Shots that hit here will pass straight through, not damaging the vehicle, so that's always a bonus as the STA-1 does have a very large side profile. The shape of the hull at the back as well means that you don't have the problem that you have on the STA-1, and that is trying to aim over the back of the tank. For quite a large arc, you have terrible gun depression. You have an extra degree of gun depression over the rear of this tank, and also the arc is much smaller for the limited gun depression. Let's take a quick look at the armor profile in World of Tanks Viewer. Here's our STA-2, and here is its armor profile. The upper front plate is 45 degrees thick. It's well angled, but you're going to have to angle the front of the tank like this if you want to ricochet. As we can see here, even angled at 45 degrees, it's only 74 millimeters thick on the near side. You have to angle it like this before any part of the hull armor will become a ricochet. The thickest part of the armor on the tank is this rim that runs around here, which is 70 millimeters thick. And considering this is a Tier 8 tank that doesn't get preferential matchmaking, unless you've got maybe Tier 6s shooting at you, you're not going to bounce much. Really, the only part that can truly absorb on this vehicle will be the mantlet. There is 124 millimeters of spaced armor here and 70 millimeters outside that. If we hide this, however, there is a giant area of 0 millimeters behind that, which gives this a frontal armor thickness of about 130 millimeters effective. We can see that some areas of the tank do spike up to about 200 to 300 millimeters along this mantlet, generally the angled area on it. But this means that if you have to engage an STA-2, try and shoot it in the cheeks of the turret armor about here or on the other side here. Nevertheless, if we compare this to the CDC, which is also coming out in patch 9.6, the other Tier 8 premium medium tank being released, we can see that the CDC pretty much ranges from about 100 to at most 150. Unfortunately, a lot like the Type 61, this armor is very tall and not very thick, which makes the chances of an artillery one-shotting you very likely indeed. But at least the frontal armor on your tank is thick enough that enemies are not going to be able to penetrate you reliably with HE ammunition, unlike the CDC, and that's probably one of the main advantages that the STA-2 has over the French Tier 8 premium medium tank. So moving on to the armament of the STA-2, it is a 90mm and it's a mixed bag really. The rate of fire is excellent. 8.45 is 0.45 better rate of fire than the STA-1. But its penetration really does suck, at least compared to the STA-1 and Centurion Mark 1, the Indenpanzer, the Panther 2, and even the new AMX CDC. 185mm is not going to reliably go through the front of most heavy tanks that it will meet, whereas 218 is starting to get to the area where you can penetrate in IS-3's front reliably, or even the lower plate of a T-32. 185 is going to struggle against a T-32's hull, especially if it's well angled, let alone an IS-6. The alpha damage is as standard, but the accuracy it's not excellent, it's 0.37, and we saw on the CDC it's 0.34, but it does have the same aim time at 2.2. If we take a look at the gun on the relatively new Panther 88 and compare it to the gun on the STA-2, we can see that the Panther 88 has an excellent rate of fire at 8.7, better penetration, better accuracy, albeit worse aim time. The STA-2 on the other hand does have excellent heat penetration, 275mm, but you're going to be paying 4,400 a shot to do that 240 alpha damage, which is going to very quickly eat through your credits. And you're going to have to do so if you want to go through most Tier 8, Tier 9, or Tier 10 heavy tanks, and even a lot of the Tier 9 and Tier 10 medium tanks frontally. It's bizarre to me that really the penetration on the STA-1 was one of the specialities of the vehicle, and to completely give this up on the STA-2 seems pretty bizarre, and it's a massive blow to the tank for me personally. Nevertheless, the turret traverse on the tank is really good at 44 degrees, and the view range is 380 meters, which is alright for a Tier 8 medium tank. Anyway, that's quite enough of that. Let's take a look to see how this vehicle performs in some gameplay. So, here we go. I'm playing in the STA-2 on Corellia. This is an assault game mode. Check out the mobility of this tank. We're losing a little bit of speed going up these slopes. The STA-2 really doesn't handle slopes very well at all. But once it manages to get on the flat, it does do pretty okay. Getting up to its top speed limit now. So I'm making an aggressive play. I want to get to the D4 area, where I can use the gun depression of this tank to take on my enemies. So we fire one on the move there against the Panther 88. We're under a lot of fire. A lot of fire. We've managed to get to where we wanted to go. From this position, we can be aggressive and put pressure on the enemies, spot them for our team, like we're doing against the Centurion 7-1. We put one shell in right through his side armor there. We double back and take a shot at the WZ-132. Unfortunately, we miss and he connects his heat round into our tank. Our second shell misses as well. Looks like he just managed to get behind some rocks for cover. We hit that one, however. And check out the rate of fire on this gun. The rate of fire is excellent indeed. If there's one redeeming feature about the STA-2, it has to be the rate of fire. So an LTTB went on a hero run in front of me. We narrowly avoid the Borsig and connect one into the corner under the rock. Now a 1390 decides he wants to kill me. We're going to try and keep our frontal armor to our opponent. And oh, we just managed to survive and take him out. So I think our tracks absorbed one shot there, but really we're not going to be bouncing any rounds from the 90mm on the AMX 1390. We put a shot into the Centurion 7-1 and pull back. We're just spotting him for our allies. And the STA-2 can do that very effectively indeed. Once it gets into a position with its mobility and its gun depression, it can be very effective. We bounce off the side of an E75 there. That time we just tracked him. I do feel that if we were in the STA-1, that those first two shells would have gone in, but at least our third connects with the E75. And our fourth. So not too bad there. I felt like the STA-1 would have penetrated those side shots. It's something to take into account. Now we're just gunning for the hatch on the Super Pershing. Can't quite get through the top of his vehicle. And we missed there. The accuracy on this gun is 0.37. So making these shots at 440 meters or so is quite challenging. Don't want to TK my friend, try and sneak a shot past him, but we're unable to hit him. And I believe for all of that firing that we did, I think we only did 480 damage or so, which is a little disappointing. We're on 82 hit points, but this game is nearly over, so I decide to be aggressive and to put pressure on our opponents. There's the Yak Tiger. We miss our first shell. Bounce our second as he was turning his armor towards us. Now it becomes a game of cat and mouse. He's facing me, he's facing me. He's still facing me. Now he starts to turn around, and so we can engage him. I load a heat round. These are the 275mm penetration rounds. It's completely unnecessary for the side of the Yak Tiger there. Managed to hit an extra shell into him. And reload AP. Going after him. But my team managed to secure him before we get there. So a fairly standard kind of game for the STA-2 here, really. We managed to race our way into position. We dealt with our opponents one by one. You got to see the excellent gun depression meant that we could always engage from the slope over here. And the track traverse meant that we could quickly re-engage that 1390. I'd like to highlight that we kind of struggled with our engine power along this shallow gradient here, only getting up to our top speed towards the mid part of the push, so to say. And we saw that the lack of gun depression made it quite hard to thread in those shots at long range, and also that .37 accuracy doesn't help either. I feel like the STA-1 and the AMX CDC would have done more damage this game, but let's remember that it's not really fair to compare the STA-2 and the STA-1 directly, because this tank makes a huge amount of credits, as we can see here. We made 88,000 credits this game, getting 1,704 experience for a round that seemed rather unimpressive. Still, this was a first-class mastery badge. We finished third on our team, picking up 2 kills and dealing just over 2,000 damage, but we got 1,800 spotting damage from our aggressive position. Now, the ammunition on this tank is very cheap indeed. And apart from the 2 heat rounds that we fired, it was a very inexpensive battle, and I'd expect that we got about 70,000 credits profit from that very short game indeed. Let's take a look how the vehicle performs in some more gameplay. So now I want to show you how the STA-2 does in its environment. And that is on a ridgeline where it's using its gun depression, meaning that it can hide its top turret weak points, and engaging against AMX CDCs. So we put 3 shots in already. We bounce him, connect the 4th. Now we have a Waffenträger auf Panzervier. He doesn't have the gun depression to engage us. So we're going to wait for a Super Pershing now. Now a Super Pershing, on the other hand, is a different can of worms. It's not a CDC. We can't penetrate his turret so reliably. But it is another Tier 8 Premium Medium tank, and until patch 9.6, I believe the only one in the game. Apart from the FCM 50T, but that is classified as a heavy, even though it really plays out like a medium. So we're trying to thread some shots here against the Super Pershing. And let me just show you something that I'm going to highlight later on, that the actual cupola on the STA-2 is quite thin indeed. Well, thin, I should more say that it's not tall, it's short. It's short on the tank. And so once you angle the vehicle upwards like this and use the 10 degrees of gun depression, you only really expose your mantlet. And that makes your armor fairly effective. It's just such a shame that the vehicle has got 185mm of penetration, which make it unreliable to go through the front of the Super Pershing's turret. Well, at least the spaced armor, and you need to loop a shell either underneath on the left or above on the left to hit his cupolas. But this really is a bread and butter situation for the STA-2, and this is the kind of gameplay that you are going to have to excel at if you want to be successful in the vehicle. Finally got another one in, and the Super Pershing realizes that he's beat, tries to retreat, but it's too late for him. So far, really good. We took a few shots there, as you can see, bouncing off the well-angled upper part of our spaced armor on the mantlet. Only 1 penetrated our tank, and we dished out quite a lot of punishment. And that really is where the STA-2 is at its strongest. It needs to use its gun depression to force its opponents to aim up at its mantlet armor. If you were to shoot the STA-2 from this angle, it hides the top weak points of the vehicle. And also the curve on the mantlet, as we can see here, means that the top part of it is very well angled indeed, and you will be able to bounce shots. Let's just take a quick look how the STA-2 and the STA-1 compare when they meet on ridgelines like this. So here we have Mako playing in the STA-1 and myself playing in the STA-2 above him. Let's see how the tanks compare when they meet on ridgelines like this. We're able to put a shot into the top of the STA-1 and Mako can't see my cupola. I can damage him and he can't damage me. We'll switch sides just to make sure that it's a fair test, and exactly the same thing happens. I'm able to shoot the top of Mako's cupola, and when he hits me, he's only able to damage my observation device. And so that is one advantage that the STA-2 has over the STA-1, and you can take advantage of that to outplay your opponents on ridgelines, how the STA-1 simply couldn't. Now for a mobility comparison, let's see how the STA-1 and the STA-2 do in a drag race up the hill. And they're off! I'm driving in the STA-2 and Mako is driving in his STA-1, and we can clearly see that the STA-1 accelerates up the hill faster. Mako apparently never dropped below, I think, was it 16 or 18 kilometers an hour, but you can see my speed dipping in the STA-2, down to 13, down to 12, touching 11 momentarily. While the 70 extra horsepower on the STA-1 engine allows it to get up the slope faster. And to show it was a fair test, we changed positions, and the outcome was the same. So now we're going to test the STA-1 and the STA-2 in a spin test to see how their traverse speed is affected with the engine power difference. So they're both set off at the same time. The STA-1 completes its full circle before the STA-2 does. So you guys might have seen this before. We are going to do a run around a circuit of Himmelsdorf. Mako sets off at 15 seconds and 24 minutes. The STA-2 is so much slower to accelerate, the much worse top speed limit. Its track traverse, however, I would say is better than the AMX CDC. But as we can see, I set off many seconds later. And Mako finishes at 23 minutes and 37 seconds by the looks of it. I'll check that out in more detail later. Now we're going to see how the STA-1 performs in a race around Himmelsdorf. It sets off at 13 minutes and 30 seconds. The STA-1 is faster to accelerate than the STA-2. We loop around that corner gracefully. The track traverse on this tank really is excellent, just like on the STA-2. And we finish in 35, 36, 37. And so while the engine power difference of 70 horsepower does seem to make a difference when you have to go up slopes, around the flats of Himmelsdorf it was only really that initial acceleration that made the difference between the speeds, with the STA-2 finishing 1.1 seconds slower than the STA-1, which is roughly about 3%. I have to admit, I think that the STA-2 is probably one of the most confusing Tier 8 premiums they've added in a long time. It doesn't get preferential matchmaking, so this vehicle will meet Tier 10 tanks. So really, you expect it to be able to compete with Tier 10 tanks in some way. Now the STA-1 competes with Tier 10 tanks by having excellent penetration, even with its standard rounds. And really, the only definitive advantage that the STA-2 has over the STA-1 is the rate of fire, and also, as we mentioned, the differences in the cupola and the ability for the STA-2 to aim over the back of its tank. But I really think you'd be hard-pressed to try and say that these minor advantages are worth the 10% mobility loss and the huge penetration loss on the standard rounds between the STA-1 and the STA-2. Going from 218 to 185 is absolutely gigantic. And for having armor that pretty much only works against low-tier tanks, low-penetration guns, and HE, I would rather play the AMX CDC over the STA-2. And if I wanted to have armor, I'd probably choose the FCM50T, which in my last video was faster than the STA-2 around Himmelsdorf, as well as having a better armor and a better gun in every regard apart from the rate of fire. And let's also not forget that the FCM50T has preferential matchmaking. It will never meet tier 10 tanks, even though it's got 30 more millimeters of penetration on its standard ammunition. Really, I feel that the STA-2 is probably going to be one of the least competitive tier 8 premiums when it's introduced into the game. Sure, it's a fantastic all-rounder, and I think if the tank got preferential matchmaking, then it would still be fairly okay. But the fact that this vehicle does not get preferential matchmaking, and the only way to really compete with the higher tier tanks will be to fire premium rounds at them, kind of defeats the point of making extra credits on your premium vehicles. And so I think that the STA-2 is only really going to be useful to Japanese medium tank drivers. And that's not a bad thing. The SDB-1 is, in my opinion, the best well-rounded tier 10 medium tank in the current meta of the game. And to have a tank that allows me to train that crew up while making a lot of credits kind of gives the STA-2 even half a reason to exist. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, or it was maybe just useful to you, please consider giving it a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And if you haven't already, click up here and you can go through to my AMX CDC tank preview video and find out everything that you need to know about the other tier 8 premium medium tank coming in patch 9.6. And do let me know in the comments down below if I've missed any features of the STA-2 which prevent it from being pushed into kind of a competitive obscurity. I'd be really interested to know what you guys think, and which one's your favorite? Do you like the STA-2 or do you like the AMX CDC? And how do you think they compare directly to the FCM50T? Anyway guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.